Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Okay, and we are ready.
All right. Welcome to the March 21st, 2024 meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, Chair of the committee. And tonight we're joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth, and this meeting is called to order at 6:32 this evening. As a reminder, New York State law requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on, their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. And if there's time following the committee's discussion, we'll field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. So if there's anybody that's able to take minutes, please let me know. I think somebody had volunteered for.
Someone who's not here.
Yes.
I did them last.
I know you did, you're
Yeah,
off the hook.
Stu did them in January, Steve did them in February.
So someone who's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any volunteers?
He's first on the list.
Yeah, let's just assign them to Eric.
Okay.
He bailed on us last minute. All right, and that brings us to the attendance, and Brendan can conduct the roll call.
Okay. Committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser.
Present.
Eric Goldberg isn't with us tonight. Neither is Gerald Jones. Rupal Kakad.
Present.
Steve O is not here. Steve Perez.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
And Sullivan also isn't with us tonight. And Haider Zaidi.
Present.
Okay, unfortunately, we do not have a quorum.
All right. So that brings us to the agenda, and given the absence of quorum, I'm gonna make one change here and gonna lay over item number 3, review of public safety budget requests to April. At that time, we can hopefully have a quorum and finalize those requests for the budget committee. But we do have a couple of items to talk about tonight. I know we have some representatives from the elected offices with us. So we're gonna continue our discussion on retail theft in the district. And then we're gonna also continue our discussion on the enforcement of the unlicensed cannabis shops. I know there's several committees taking this matter up, so we're gonna stick to the enforcement aspect of it here. We had invited the sheriff's office and they declined or did not respond to our invitation. So we were hoping to get some clarity on the process and what's going on, but we do have some of the representatives from the elected offices to cover both of those issues. Let's see. So we'll start with the shoplifting conversation. So last month, for those who aren't with us, we had a lengthy discussion with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and members of the Business Improvement Districts.
Sorry to interrupt, but make sure,
Oh,
copy
yes.
the agenda and then the minutes from the most recent meeting.
Okay. Sorry about that. So if there are no objections, then we'll adopt the agenda as amended. And then the minutes from February were distributed ahead of time. If there are no corrections, are there any corrections or changes to the minutes? All right. Seeing none, minutes are adopted and will soon be on the CB6 website. Obviously the ground rules, I think everybody knows, nobody may speak until granted the floor. Raise your hand if you have a question. And obviously the chat function for committee members, should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. I think we all, are aware of that. So back to the agenda. So we're going to talk about, shoplifting, the retail theft first, and then, unfortunately, we don't have a quorum tonight, so we cannot, pass any resolutions. But we can, potentially do that in April. So if we come to anything we need to do, I just want to kind of update everybody on the retail theft, numbers. Since they're now on the CompStat weekly, reports that NYPD issues. So if anybody wants to track it, precinct by precinct or, location by location, you can certainly do so. Now it's a little bit easier. So I'll give the 17 precincts numbers first, in terms of retail theft. For the 28-day period ending this past Sunday, there were 70 thefts in the 17th precinct against 43 last year for the same corresponding time frame. And year to date, 171 versus 150. So a 14% year to date increase and a 63% increase for the previous month. The 13th precinct looks pretty bad. Unfortunately, the 13th precinct's numbers are not necessarily all in CB6. They cover the Union Square area, which extends into CB5, but their numbers are not good. 223 thefts for the past 28 days, and just in the 13th precinct, against 96 for the same time frame last year. And year to date, they have 560 retail thefts against 293. So again, that covers the southern half of CB6 and it extends into the Union Square area. So I don't have a drill down by district there, but I just wanted to bring everybody up to date on that. And with that, I'm gonna bring in our panel of experts here, just to kind of introduce themselves. I think we know, and see if they have any comments. Here, let's start with Brendan. Do you have the name, all the? You want?
Yes,
Okay.
so we have a few elected offices here. I see we have Assembly Member Epstein's office, Joanna from their office. I see Justin from Senator Kruger's office, Catherine Denby from Senator Gonzalez's office, and then also Patrick Hill from Councilmember Powers' office.
Okay. Terrific. So thank you all for joining us. I'm just going to give a summary, and committee members feel free to add to anything that I have, add to anything that I have here. But some of the things we talked about from last month that we were looking to get a little more into here, or some, one was more resources for the courts, really just to increase capacity. Was one of the things that, we heard last month was one of the roadblocks, and it really shouldn't be. And then the other one is some of the discovery issues that are causing cases to be dismissed. So I know that issue came up last year, around the budget timeframe. And then, we did not get a chance to invite the Midtown Community Court, or whatever they're called, Center for whatever they're called. But I do want to hear from them. I think that'll be a different program. Because right now we want to stay focused on the retail theft, but I think that is a potential solution if they can be expanded. But I want to bring in our state elected representatives here first, to kind of talk through some of these, what have your offices had, what's been discussed within your offices, and, are there any potential solutions in sight that you guys see on this issue? So start with Justin Flagg from Senator Kruger's office.
Sure. Yeah, I thought it would be useful to go through what is kind of on the table in the budget. There's a few elements that address retail theft. both in the governor's proposed executive budget and then in the Senate one house. I'm less familiar with the Assembly one house, but I think, a lot of the same issues are being covered in various forms. So I'll just go through some of the actions that were in the Senate one house on this, noting, of course, that it'll all be negotiated in the final budget. So this is none of it's a done deal yet. So the Senate one house takes a few steps. We create a retail crimes task force within the state police. This is something that the governor had proposed in her state of the state, I believe, but she didn't put any language in the budget. So we wanted to actually lay it out in the statute what it would be. So this would be a task force within the state police to support localities, to create a centralized data system to be able to share real-time data and intel, would be able to investigate large-scale organized retail theft across county lines, between multiple jurisdictions. We put in $30 million to fund that program, which is the same level of funding as the governor's budget, though she had it in a few different buckets. So we put it all in this one bucket and then laid out what the task force would be doing. So that's one piece. We accept the governor's language to create a commercial security tax credit program. So this would be for businesses to install security cameras or other security devices, would get a tax credit to support them for doing that. The governor put that in her budget, so we accepted that language. We put in $150 million for prosecutorial services grants. So this supports discovery related costs, as well as things like retail theft, dedicated teams, and general prosecutorial services. Our version aggregates multiple funding streams with the goal of trying to streamline the dispersal of the money, ensure that it actually all gets out the door. And we added $13 million on top of what is in the executive budget. And again, the executive budget had a few different pots. And so we aggregate those, hoping that will kind of grease the wheels. We also added language, which I don't believe is in the governor's budget, to allow for the aggregation of retail theft crimes in cases where you have multiple successive crimes that occur for at least a period of 3 months. So if you have, it basically allows repeat offenders to be charged for the total value of stolen goods, as opposed to each individual incident being charged separately. So it allows you to elevate the level of the charges up to grand larceny if you cross the threshold of $1,000 worth of goods in that period of time. The governor had language on fostering the sale of stolen goods online. We modified that language slightly to ensure that it is targeting the actual individuals and third-party sellers who are engaged in selling stolen goods, as opposed to the platforms themselves. Felt it would. The point is to target those people who are moving the stolen goods and have more impact that way. Those are the main bits that are in the budget. There's also a bill that Senator Krueger co-sponsors, carried by Senator Thomas, which is related to the issue of selling stolen goods online, which basically requires online marketplaces like Amazon to collect and verify information from high volume third-party sellers, so that consumers and law enforcement are able to be aware of the sources of the goods that they're buying. So they're not buying stolen goods, but also other questionable goods, that knockoffs and things like that. So that is what's in the budget on this topic.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Justin. So I guess the one question that I have regarding the online marketplaces is, how is jurisdiction going to be enforced? Let's say, how do we know where these people are? you know, and are they even in the United States? How's that gonna be tracked?
That's a little beyond my level of depth. You know, I think part of that is speaks to that Senator Thomas's bill. You know, we obviously need the information. And you know, the nexus issue for online selling is complicated, I think. You know, the first step is to establish the crime. I can look into it a little bit more and see what some of the challenges are and talk to our council and how they actually envision that being done.
All right, thanks. So committee members, I'll open it up to you guys for any questions here, and then we'll hear from and Catherine, Joanna, and Patrick. Studio.
You talk about the task force a little bit. The fact that it's state police rather than NYPD suggests that this is organized crime that happens over the county border lines. So why is this going to the state police rather than NYPD, this task force?
Well, I mean, I think certainly the governor and the Senate see it as a statewide issue. It's not confined to the city. The goal of the task force is to work with the local police to bolster their efforts and also to streamline issues of multiple jurisdictions that might, you know, have slow down or stymie efforts to deal with retail theft rings or more organized crime involvement. So that's why I think, you know, we want to, it's statewide, but also some of these rings are going beyond one jurisdiction, and we want to be able to make sure that the localities are still able to go after them.
No, I'm just asking because NYPD actually enforces the law here. So, you know, within the city, it sort of makes sense that NYPD have its own task force, but.
Well, you know, I think I agree that makes sense. I think that would have to sort of come up from the city. It's not necessarily a state budget issue unless the city were to bring it to us as a state budget issue. It's more of a mayor's office and city council question, I think.
Yeah, we can talk to Patrick about that. But I want to stick with, do we have any other questions for Justin before I'm going to turn to, let's stay in the state Senate and go to Catherine. I don't know, Catherine, do you have anything to add beyond what Justin said?
Not much. I feel like Justin, I think with Senator Krueger being on the chair of the Finance Committee has a much went through, yeah, pretty much all we have. I think particularly when it concerns illegal cannabis shops, something we are hoping, and if this is in the budget or later on, is or have been talking about, is how to hold landlords accountable, even with the fines, raising the fines that landlords are required to pay, but also, you know, there's a clear incentive for landlords, despite these fines, to continue to lease. And so how do we actually, the other thing, yeah, we're looking very closely at the online stolen goods bill that Justin mentioned. For a lot of these bills, if they make it to the budget, and if they don't, they continue to go through the legislative process. And so that's one that could come to our committee. And so we're always on the lookout for bills that could come to the Internet Technology Committee after budget. That's, yeah.
All right, thanks, Catherine. Let's go to Joanna from Assemblymember Epstein's office. We'll stay in the Albany circuit here, and then we'll progress down to the city. So Joanna, do you have anything your office is working on, or you know, any solutions that we haven't already talked about?
Yes, thank you. So as our chief of staff / legislative director, Jackson, was unable to attend today. So he will, regarding retail theft and and online as well. He'll be following up further offline. But I do have I'm sorry, 1 second, please. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. So for legislative efforts to address the issues, last year legislation was passed as a part of the state budget to increase civil and tax penalties for the unlicensed and illicit sale of cannabis, and provided additional enforcement power to the Office of Cannabis Management and the Department of Taxation and Finance to enforce new regulatory requirements and to close stores engaged in illegal sales of cannabis. In addition to this, specifically, OCM may seize the product and seek injunctions to close illicit shops. And so for this year, new legislation was introduced by the governor in her executive budget release. And this bill, among other things, would expand OCM's authority to seal, padlock a building of premises of an illicit cannabis operator upon the presence of certain factors and following issuance of the notice of violation and other to seize unlicensed activity. And there is like additional information. Would you like also additional information about the assembly member's point of view on the situation?
Sure.
Thank you. He shares the concerns the board has raised and is hopeful about padlocking legislative passing season. He has been active in contacting the landlords of the illegal businesses to inform them that their tenants are breaking the law and what their liabilities as landlords are. He has also received coverage in the media for a press conference held outside an illegal business to draw attention to the efforts the office is taking to get illicit shops shut down. And as far as the realistic timeline for seeing any action that would be helpful, the legislation being contemplated this season, the legislation is proposed in the budget, has an immediate effective date, which the budget is due April 1st. If the legislative, like what is being proposed in the budget is adopted, we could start seeing impact soon. It will also depend on OCM's capacity to enforce the laws. They have told us that they are, of course, hiring more staff to do that.
So when we say hiring more staff, I mean, we're under the impression that only a tiny percentage of fines that have been issued have actually been collected. Does this scale, do we have any idea, in terms of more resources, will that actually, how do we scale it to the number of people that are needed versus what's in the budget?
Thank you for that question. I can have Jackson follow up further on that question offline. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the concerns here is, even as an initial step to, to issue these fines, but if nobody's actually collecting them, it's hard to even be able to use that as leverage in this situation. So I know it's a resource issue. So I know it's subject to the budget negotiations, but I would say that's certainly top of mind for this district. All right, any
I
questions?
could add just one thing on that, or I can wait.
No.
And again, this is not my area of expertise, but I do know that part of what's happening in the budget discussion is talks about how to empower local enforcement more, and I think that gets to the staffing issue, because there's lots of local law enforcement and other agencies with staff available to do this, but particularly NYPD has argued that they need certain additional powers. I don't know the ins and outs of that discussion, but I do know that the mayor's office has been, up in Albany, involved in those discussions and trying to get those additional powers. So that's going to be part of what we see in the final budget, I think, is some empowerment, additional empowerment. They certainly have authority now that may or may not be used, but additional empowerment for localities to go after the shops, so that that just sort of bolsters the manpower that can be brought to bear.
Interesting. Okay. Joanna, did you have anything? Or were we good?
Nothing further. I'm saying thank you, Justin.
Oh, perfect. Any questions before we move on to Patrick? Sandy?
I just have a question as to why is that a budget issue? Having local enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's particularly related to the budget.
Well, I mean, whether things are in and out of the budget is not everything that goes in the budget is necessarily has a direct fiscal impact. But there is also there's funding for local law enforcement. There's funding for OCM. So the broad issue, the universe of cannabis enforcement is a budget issue. So I think there's a practical and also a political reality to trying to deal with it all at once.
Thanks, Justin. All right, so let's move to the city. I know we talked about a couple of city budget issues. So Patrick Hill from Councilmember Power's office. So we got two, I mean, we can cover both topics here, the retail theft and the unlicensed cannabis shops.
I have less info on the retail theft, but I can definitely look into that more, and I'd be more than happy to come back next month and go further into that. I mainly have more information in regards to the illegal cannabis shops and what we're trying to do to address that. I can kind of piggyback off of what they were just talking about in terms of empowering local enforcement. We have the issue of illegal cannabis shops, and it's really been a significant concern. It's a giant game of whack-a-mole. We're shutting down one shop only leads to the emergence of another. But the law that City Council Member Keith Powers just recently introduced is Intro 0397 is the actual intro number. It was introduced recently, and it already has 23 sponsors. It's a bill to amend the nuisance abatement law to clarify the distribution of sales, selling at wholesale or retail, or delivering to consumers of any cannabis product, medical cannabis, without the appropriate registration, license, or permit issued by New York State, would be listed as a public nuisance subject to permanent and preliminary injunctions. Would create a new category of a public nuisance involving the selling, delivery, or giving away of cannabis to any person underage. And the bill would also make the above mentioned public nuisances subject to temporary closing orders and temporary restraining orders. So under the New York State law legalizing cannabis sales, OCM was, as this was kind of just explained, OCM was given the authority to investigate and enforce matters of illegal cannabis shops. But due to budgetary constraints, OCM does not currently have the adequate staff to handle the enforcement side of things, especially here in the city. So utilizing the existing nuisance abatement law framework that's in place from the law that was established in 1977, I believe, which I believe it was created because of a lot of the issues happening in Times Square then, legal prostitution and many more. But it was created then to give a framework to the city to expeditiously shut down residential and commercial establishments that are deemed to be nuisances. So this would add this as a category to that law, which would it would empower local law enforcement to be able to go and shut down these shops in a much faster way. So this law would allow the city to file a closing order with a judge, and once that order is filed, it's assigned to one of the local law enforcement agencies. Most likely it would be NYPD, given their resources that they have, and then they could facilitate the rapid closure of a location. So currently there's 23 co-sponsors. We recently, this past week, we sent around a letter to all of the council offices that have not signed on, calling on them to sign on to this piece of legislation so that we can try to get this passed as soon as possible and help crack down on this issue.
All right, thanks, Patrick. So Can you just kind of walk us through what's happening today? I understand the sheriff's office has been, lead enforcement agency. NYPD also has a role, but what's happening today? And I guess this, and will this piece of legislation itself, cut through all the red tape?
We think it will. Currently, when folks submit complaints about illegal cannabis shops, it does go directly to OCM, and it goes directly to their enforcement unit. They investigate the concerns. They check into the licensing, any sales to folks that are underage, and then through that they can. I believe it goes. They have to file a report with the courts, and I'm not entirely sure what happens after that. I'd have to look further into it and get back to you. But in terms of what this would do, would essentially allow for the city to rapidly, instead of having to wait for it to get assigned to OCM and then have that go through OCM, get investigated, and go to one of the, the sheriff's office or the Office of Special Enforcement, I believe, is one of the groups that is tasked with enforcing through OCM. I could be wrong on that, but this would allow for the city to essentially step in and get a court order to shut down these locations in a more rapid manner.
And so let's say that this bill were to pass, what's the role of OCM in this process? If this bill becomes law and the city is able to address it?
Well, I believe OCM can still investigate, and that framework still will exist on the state level for those kinds of complaints. This will just allow for the local, New York City to have a bit more of their own authority to investigate these and get them closed down, because they are popping up, faster than we can address them, as everyone can see if they walk down any city block in, a 2-block radius or 2-block direction, you'll find one. So we're hoping that this will gain more support. Like I said, we sent out a letter to the other council offices just a couple days ago. Might have actually been yesterday, calling on additional co-sponsors to join. And we're hopeful that we will reach the goal that we need to pass this.
All right, makes sense. So I guess the other piece of this is, are there resources in place to actually execute everything? I know you mentioned NYPD resources, which obviously are very scarce at the moment at a high level. So, is there anything that you foresee going into the city budget, which has a July 1st timeline?
I do think a lot of the budgetary aspects of this law would be discussed for the upcoming fiscal budget, with the city council budget that they will be putting together in the next few months for the next fiscal year. As of right now, I don't have any additional details as to how, or what additional funding would be allocated. This law would essentially just be put in place to give that legal empowerment to the local authorities, so that this can actually be a possibility that we can explore. It obviously would require possibly additional funds to be allocated to the various enforcement agencies, but like I said, that would be up for discussion with the council. So I can definitely keep folks posted on that. As of right now, this is where the legislation stands, and I've been, going back and forth with some folks at the community at CB6, Brendan and Brian. I can keep you guys posted as well to any updates to the legislation. If there's any, changes in the coming weeks, or if there's any hearings that are scheduled to discuss it, I can definitely let folks know ahead of time so they can tune in.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Any questions from the committee or Sandy?
So I think one of the things Matt was alluding to is where we have between state and city agencies. Is anyone from the state able to clarify if that would be an issue, or is that outside of the jurisdiction?
I didn't quite hear the question.
I'm sorry. I was just asking if there'll be any conflicts between state and city resources if this law is enacted. I mean, that's kind of what Matt was alluding to, is will this, you know, kind of fall between the cracks of our different enforcement agencies?
Are you suggesting sort of that no one will take ownership because?
That would be the worst outcome, but potentially, yes.
I mean, you know, again, I'm not expert on it. I think this is, my feeling is that this is an issue where you actually have a lot of agencies trying to be the ones who can do something, and feeling that they are stymied for various different reasons. The localities because they feel they don't have the power, and you know, the state level perhaps because they feel like they're not on the ground. So I don't think that particular issue would be an issue. You know, I can't speak to whether this intro is you know has any conflicts with state law, but you know, I think sort of the more the merrier in terms of power for enforcement. And you know, part of what we're trying to do through the budget discussions is to figure out not only to give more powers to the localities to do things like padlocking, but to figure out what we need to do to streamline the relationship between OCM and local enforcement, so that when local enforcement needs action from OCM, they're able to get that more quickly.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I had an additional question. I was wondering, is there any way we can find out where legal licensed shops or where shops have been given a license, either currently or coming up? Is there a map or a citywide directory of what shops are legal?
I can, I believe there is information on the OCM website of, you know, all of the currently legally, you know, licensed cannabis dispensaries. I'm not sure if there's like a map widget that is associated with it, but I believe they do have a list of all of the businesses that have been issued proper licenses. I can try to find that and I can put that in the chat if that would be helpful.
Trying to find it right now for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Here we go.
I could be mistaken. I believe there is a page.
Yeah, I have it on my phone, and I mean, at least from my phone, it looks like I can drill down to New York County. But
Yes, I believe that's the one I'm referring to, the list that you have pulled up.
It is not a map, but it is the list.
yeah, so I mean, I mean,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean, I would say just looking at this, there's certainly an opportunity to
create a map.
yeah, to create a map or at least a drill down option where you can search by zip code or district or some other geographic boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so any other questions for this group? I mean, I guess we've shifted more into the cannabis topic, which is fine. So any other questions?
Yes, I have one general question for either the state or the city elected offices. Is there anything that the community board or committee can do to support any of these efforts?
I would say if the community board would want to pass a resolution on you know, the legislation that the council members put forth, we would greatly appreciate that. But I mean, I believe that, I mean, in terms of supporting our legislation, supporting our efforts, that would be the best way.
Anything from the state level? I know, we probably will not, we may or may not have another full board meeting before the budget, is finalized, but, if there's anything on the state list that could be beneficial for support.
Thank you. I will also, Jackson will also follow up further on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
would agree. Sorry, yeah. I would, I mean, I agree with Patrick. I understand that there's not a quorum tonight, but, and hopefully the budget, is a little bit more time this year. A lot of these bills though, if they're not in the budget, like they're gonna continue. So I think maybe the next session would be resolutions on individual bills if they don't end up passing. So, for the next, meeting, yeah. They don't end up passing in the budget. Sorry, just to be clear.
Makes sense, gotcha. All right. But I just have a couple other things that I mentioned at the top, so I'm gonna circle back to the retail theft for a minute. We honed in on more resources for the courts. Is there any talk about that anywhere in the state budget? To break that, log jam or backlog of cases?
You have to double check before answering. I'm not certain. Yeah, I can take a look and get back to you.
Yeah, you can follow up, that's fine. And the same question about, any potential changes to the discovery, bill. I know that was kind of tossed around last budget season, but I don't think anything actually made it in. But I know the district attorney's office, has blamed that for having a lot of cases dismissed, whereas they just want a couple of slight tweaks that would, enable things to move forward.
Yeah, there has not been discussion of that. I don't believe the executive budget has any changes to discovery, and the Senate one house does not. And I don't think the Assembly one house does either.
All right, anything else from the committee?
I know, I don't think we have anyone from the mayor's office here, but I'm just curious if anybody from the city can comment on the mayor's initiatives that were put together in a report last year called Combating Retail Theft in New York City. And there was an entire list of interventions, both on the law enforcement side, but also on the programming side to connect people with programming. And I'm just curious, we weren't able to find out a lot of information about how those programs are, are they funded? Are they operational? Are they working? And if anybody has any information about that, it would be helpful context.
Yeah, I don't know if Patrick has any info, but we can certainly reach out to the mayor's office. To see.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, but we could be helpful in trying to reach out to the mayor's office through our contacts and trying to get information. Maybe bring them to the conversation following Public Safety Committee meeting. We could have a further discussion about this, and I could bring back more information as to the city council's efforts on addressing retail theft.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So I definitely did not have that information with me today.
Not a problem. All right, anything, committee, any action that we want to prep for next time? Obviously, we don't have a quorum tonight, so we can't pass any bills, or any resolutions, but we could certainly talk about drafting something for next month. So I think, I don't know, in terms of the nuisance abatement bill, is there another committee that's considering a resolution on that, or?
And
I don't wanna
we
step
did
on.
discuss at exec that we should try and keep all our cannabis issues in one committee, and that's going to be the business affairs and licensing.
Okay.
But I think if there's something that this committee would like to add to their resolution, that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we can touch base with them and see
Yes.
where it is, but, so I guess that was the question I had for you, was there's no need for us to actually draft a resolution on that. It's already being addressed.
It's being addressed, but I know any information you can contribute would be, because they don't have the same.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to me, the most pressing thing would be budgetary and resources, which I know certain committee members don't like when we put in any budgetary language in a resolution, but, or certain board members rather, but,
We can try.
yeah, I think that's a key there that, you know, the legislation may very well pass, but then come budget season, it's time for
That's-
resources to be allocated beyond against it, and we need to make sure it's scaled appropriately. All right, anything, I know we've covered a couple things here, anything we wanna, research further for next month or draft resolutions for?
Well, when I asked the, police commanders last month, I guess. They said that they don't have anti-crime plainclothes officers in any of the stores, and I didn't get to ask them why, if there's a prohibition to doing that. And I'm asking that because, you know, I mean, the way to, assuming that we're not dealing primarily with organized crime, which we might be, then this becomes for the city, a city issue, an NYPD issue. And maybe what we need is just more officers in the shops for plainclothes, not the uniformed officers that simply push the crime someplace else.
Yeah, I mean, the anti-crime unit was disbanded, back in 2020.
Right, but they still have plainclothes officers, right?
Not so much. I mean, some of the investigative units are plainclothes. But for the most part, it's a uniformed officer. So there'd have to be changes made, holistically at the department level. And I'm not sure if it's a city council thing or if it's just the police department. I believe it was the police department on their own, under Mayor de Blasio, disbanded that unit, in favor of uniformed officers. So I mean, that's something that could be revisited, but you know, in terms of the way they're handling the stores right now is it's on paid detail. So the store actually has to hire an officer, off duty and pay them, out of their own budget if they want them to be in the store for the whole
So
time.
the uniformed NYPD officers there are being paid by the store?
By the store, yes, unless, I mean, during the course of patrols, the regular officers that are on duty will do directed patrols at the problematic locations. And I will mention that, I don't know if everybody's aware, but the Duane Reade stores are now no longer 24 hours. That they now close at 11 o'clock at night and reopen at 7 the next morning. And also in our district, I know that at least the 575 Lexington Avenue store will be closing permanently in just a few weeks. That was one of our highest retail theft locations in this district for quite some time. So yeah, I mean, and so paid detail has been tried in a number of locations and it works, but the problem is it's very expensive and the stores don't want to pay for it. They just don't have the budget. They keep raising the prices and, you know, business is not good.
So someone who cares a lot about, who's concerned about official abuses and civil rights and liberties, I appreciate the problems that there were with the anti-crime units, but there seems to be a place to have plainclothes officers in these retail locations. Right.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being an option, but is that gonna solve the root? You know, if you drill down what's actually happening, they're making the arrests, you know, in many cases, it's the courts they're getting stuck in the courts. They're either getting tossed out, or, you know, they're just, in terms of, you heard the district attorney's office say that, you know, they're focused on like the top 20, top 30 recidivists. And so, I mean, in terms of resources, I think that's where the you know, the ball is being dropped. It's just, there's just not enough resources in the courts.
Well, and we also see that it makes sense to not prosecute all of these cases.
Right,
to divert them,
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, there's programmatic solutions in sight. If there's funding for them, that could potentially alleviate some of the problems. But in terms of the total recidivists, I mean, some of it is online marketplaces, and some of it is just, there's no penalties. So it becomes a really challenging issue. And if there's nothing in the budgets at the state level for the courts, I just don't see that getting any better. You could have more police officers on the street or paid detail through the drugstores. I just don't, they'll make the arrests one way or the other, but is that gonna mean anything in the scheme of things? We're having issues. Sandy?
Do we know which shops are targeted in our district?
I mean, generally speaking, yes. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I have access to that information pretty readily. But it's a small, I mean, it's all of them basically that are impacted at some point. But if they put paid detail, in one of the shops, then the problem just shifts to another location. So it solves the problem for that one store, but it doesn't necessarily, solve the problem. So,
And then just to further, we looked at the data last month, and the vast majority of cases are the large retailers, at least in terms of what's being reported.
Rupal?
Yeah, so I don't know if I missed it or not, but all the budget options that we discussed, whether it's the city or the state funding, did any of them include any funding to these programmatic options, like what we discussed last time, whether it's getting them the resources they need instead of just putting them in jail or something like that? Did any of those budget requests include funding to those programs?
We could put that question to, I don't know if anybody on the call knows, has any information. I don't have any specifics around that. But my understanding is that would be a state courts issue or come out of the state court budget somehow. But I think Justin already answered that he didn't, that he was gonna get back to us on specifics around that.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add just one thing, if it's appropriate. The issue of aggregating the thefts, I think actually is in part a resource issue for DAs, because it allows them to potentially, clear several cases as one case. And it's a higher charged case, so it is something that warrants their resources going to it, as opposed to something that might be a lower charge that they're making a decision about resource allocation and they're putting their resources elsewhere. So I do think that is part of the solution there in the resource question for DAs.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm sure they would welcome more resources, but yeah, I mean, they told us, flat out that, yeah, they're focused on the top 20, top 30, because that's really all that they have the manpower for, especially with the discovery issues right now. So if there's any concessions on that end, then potentially that could free up some more resources to, address more cases. Anything else, committee? Anything we want to talk about next month? I know you wanted to talk about the DOT thing, switching gears entirely, with the sidewalks. In terms of any resolutions on what we talked about tonight going forward, do you guys see any angles that, we can certainly put a lot of what we talked about, I think can go in the city budget, requests for, for manpower and stuff like that for police or, and then we'll see by next month, we should know where the state budget is. If it's even a couple weeks late, we should have a final budget by then. So yeah, Anything we want to tackle? Not.
Sorry, yeah.
All right, I mean. All right, so we can, I mean, so Stu, you and I can, talk offline and see and put together an agenda for next month. I think at some point, whether it's next month or in a few months down the road, the committee should hear from the Midtown, Community Court or whatever it's called now. To kind of understand a little bit more about their programs, and where they, where they fit in. As far as I'm concerned, that court is, represents a small number of cases. But, there might be a potential to grow that at some point, and I think we just need to understand how successful it is, before we advocate for anything, one way or the other. So that could be one item. Anything else? We will definitely talk about budget requests, but that only pertains to the city budget in this case. Whereas I think there are things that, we don't have a formal process to, list out priorities for state budget items, do we?
We can start on it.
Yeah, I mean, that might be, because as we talk through this, like half the things that we would want, a resolution isn't necessarily gonna go anywhere, but I think maybe for next budget season, it could help the state, legislators, both in the Assembly and the Senate, if they had a list of, what was important for each district. So I don't know if all districts would do that, but if we take the lead on that or just do our own, then we certainly have a list that we can pass along for budget. I know it's largely out of any individual's control when negotiations occur in Albany. But it would certainly, I think, help the district if we had it on record as to, what we need from the state. So. That's all I have. Anybody have anything else?
Not for
All
these guys, but just a small administrative question.
Okay.
I couldn't remember any objection to the minutes, and I looked it up, and it's because I didn't see the minutes. Are they on the database and I just missed them?
I thought they were emailed out about a week ago, but
I thought
They're
so.
attached to the email.
Hmm?
They're attached to the email about this meeting.
Oh, that's why.
yeah. All right, so I think that's pretty much everything. I'll waive the chair's report. I think we've covered all the material that I have. Are there any items of old or new business? All right. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn the meeting at 7:30.